Okay, so now we're going to look at a candidate getting a possible Band 6 score. Band 6 is, I would say, just about the average here in Taiwan. If you go up to Taipei, maybe it's a little bit higher, maybe at about like 6.5. But here in the Taoyuan area, 6 is pretty much the average. Even though I think a lot of people think that their ability is a little bit stronger, this is what the end result often is. So we're just getting into part 1. Here we start with the introduction.
Hello, my name is Rachel. What's your full name, please?
My full name in Chinese is Kang Hong Wei.
And what can I call you?
You can call me Steve, my English name.
Okay. Can I check your ID and passport, please?
There you go.
Right, that's fine. Okay, in the first part, I'd like to ask you some general questions about yourself.
No problem.
He sounds very confident. Okay, so here's our first topic, your hometown.
Let's talk about your hometown. Where are you from?
Well, I'm from Taipei, and I've lived there for quite a long time. The reason I like it because Taipei is a very lively city that you can find a lot of pleasures and also work and opportunities and other entertainments as well.
Okay, so the candidate sounds quite fluent, even though there do seem to be a couple of grammar errors, like, for example, I lived there for quite a long time instead of I have lived there for quite a long time. And the reason I like it is because Taipei is a very lively city. Pleasures as a plural isn't wrong necessarily, but it's a little bit unusual. And then here we have another plural, entertainments. This one doesn't work, so this should just be other entertainment.
Other entertainments as well.
And is there anything you would like to change about your hometown?
Well, for the time being, I think Taipei is very lively, as what I mentioned. I think it's already changing, but therefore I don't think there must be any special changes. But I got one point that I think it needs to be changed. It's about its English environment. I think if Taipei want to be more lively and more competitive with other cities around the world, I think Taipei should need more faster improvement in its English environment, because you can attract more foreigners to come to Taiwan and raise the reputation of Taipei.
So this was actually quite a long response. So the candidate definitely has some ideas that he wants to put forward. It doesn't always come out very smoothly. You'll notice that he uses this phrase, well, for the time being, quite often. This is the first time we see it here. So here, just again, some language problems. Very lively, as what I mentioned. So just as I mentioned. I don't think there must be any special changes. He's using the wrong modal here. He should have said there doesn't need to be any special changes. But then he does say there is a change that he wants to happen. So it's a little bit strange. First he says no changes are necessary, and then he says there is a change necessary. Okay, here, English environment. Environment is a countable noun, so we're going to need an article here. It's the English environment. There's a little bit of repetition there. More, faster. This comparative, well, comparative is just faster, not more, faster. Raises the reputation of Taipei. Okay, just some pronunciation issues there. Let's continue.
Of Taipei.
Okay, now I'd like to talk about your family. Is that okay?
No problem.
Do you have a large or small family?
Well, I have a small family.
And he doesn't tell us anything about the family. Now, in part 1, the examiner is really limited to only asking you why or why not. So if you give an answer like this, I have a small family, they're probably not going to ask you why. But you need to extend your answers. This is too short. Tell us a little bit more about your family.
A small family.
And when do you get together as a family?
Excuse me, what do you mean by when do we get together?
Okay, so here he runs into trouble because he doesn't understand the phrase. And of course, the examiner cannot rephrase the question.
When do you get together as a family?
You mean we live together?
Okay,
They can't answer that question. So if you ask them, do you mean blah, 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 they probably are not going to answer you because they're pretty much limited in what they can say in part one.
what do you like to do with your family?
Well, we like to eat. Actually, we like to taste the delicious food around, around Taipei. I think that Taipei have a lot of very delicate food and very special food, so taste too.
Let's see here. Okay, so here he starts with my, and then he goes to we. That's not such a big deal, I guess. Taipei Taipei is just one city, so of course it should be singular. Now, delicate food. Some food might actually be delicate. I'm not sure that's what he actually means here, though. Maybe he means delicious. So taste too. I don't know what the two is in reference to. Because here we have an adjective, and we have an adjective, and now here, well, this can be a noun or a verb. So tasty, maybe? So maybe you meant to say that food is tasty also.
Food, so taste too. It's a blend from the other countries as well.
There's nothing wrong with blend, although often when we talk about food from different countries being combined, we use the word fusion.
Countries as well.
Right, let's move on to your free time. Do you have a lot of free time?
Yes, for the time being, I do have a lot of free time.
Okay, so he keeps on using this phrase for the time being. It's really an overuse of this phrase.
And how do you spend your time away from work or studies?
Well, actually, I do a lot of jogging exercise. I run like 3,000 meters every day, and do some push-ups and sit-ups too. And sometimes after the work, it will help me relax. Although sometimes exercise can be also exhausting too, but it makes my feelings better. It's made my feelings better.
Okay, let's just look at some language here. Okay, so here he said the work. For work, we don't need this article, so it's just after work. In the previous video, I mentioned help, how it's used differently in English than in Chinese. So exercise makes me relaxed, not it helps me relax. And then he says it can be exhausting too. And then this last phrase, I don't know. He wanted to correct what he said before, but then he said the same thing again. It makes my feelings better. Maybe he meant to say it makes me feel better.
Feelings better. It's made my feelings better.
And do you prefer to spend time alone or with friends?
Well, I prefer to spend time with friends because, after a long day work, it's better to spend your time and share some of the experiences and maybe gossips with a friend.
Okay, so here we can see just here. So after a long day's work, so that should be possessive. Share some of the experiences and gossips with a friend. Gossip is not a countable noun, so there should be no S there. What's the other thing I wanted to mention? Oh, here. Actually, this phrase here is an example of some pretty good chunking where he paused between different ideas. Let's just listen to this again.
Your time and share some of the experiences and maybe gossips with a friend.
Share some of the experiences and maybe gossips with a friend. So that pause there just before gossips connects, gossip rather. No, not gossip. What did he say? Oh, it is gossip. Share some of the experiences and maybe gossip with a friend. That little pause there actually shows stress. So some good use of that. If he used a little bit more intonation, maybe he could have gotten a higher score for his pronunciation, but his pronunciation is quite good.
And maybe gossips with a friend.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to part 2. In part 2, I will give you a topic, and I'd like you to talk about it for 1 to 2 minutes. Before you talk, you will have 1 minute to think about what you are going to say. You may make some notes if you wish. Do you understand?
Understand.
Okay.
Okay, now this is just a small point, but if you're asked a yes/no question, like for example, do you understand? Don't just repeat the verb. That is not an answer. They're asking for a yes/no answer.
Okay. I'd like you to describe something that you would love to learn.
Okay.
Okay, so here's our preparation time.
All right, that's 1 minute. Can you start speaking now, please?
This phrase said by the examiner is a little bit different from what they usually say, but I think you get the point.
No problem. Well, I would love to learn English. The reason I love to learn it because actually I...
Alright, let me just stop here for a second. In your part 2, you are supposed to start with an introduction. You need to tell the examiner what it is that you are going to talk about, even though they know what the topic is. Of course they know because they gave you the topic. But he just says, well, I would love to learn about, well, whatever. Instead of that, you should say, I'm going to tell you about something that I would love to learn about. And that thing is whatever it is. Your part 2 really needs to start with an introduction. That just makes your answer more coherent because you're not answering a question here. So you need to kind of show why you are talking because you're talking for 2 minutes. It is the long turn.
English. The reason I love to learn it because actually I study English in my university, and I think English is pretty interesting, and I take it as my career too, and also my interest.
Okay, let's go back to what he said here. No, I'm not sure if this person is a student. No, he's not, because he said that he has his career. All right. So then this here should be in the past tense. So I studied English in my university. For university, the preposition is at, not in. I took it as my career too, and also my interest. Now here, I took it as my career. So here the verb take is okay, but it should just be in the past tense. But for interest, the verb should not be take, because here he says and also my interest. So we need a different verb, because take doesn't go with interest. So and it is also my interest, something like that.
Pretty interesting, and I take it as my career too, and also my interest. I will learn it. How I will learn it? Let me think. For the time.
This is a little bit confusing because he said that he studied English at university, but now he talks about how he will learn it. So presumably he's talking about something that's going to happen in the future, but then he should say what is going to happen in the future. And here we see this phrase for the time being again.
I'm being number 5 for university in United Kingdom. I think there's a place maybe I can sharpen my teaching skills, and by doing so.
Okay, so he is going to study again. Okay, here we see for the time being again. The verb for apply, the preposition for apply is to. You apply to a university, and United Kingdom takes the preposition the. So in the United Kingdom. This is sharpen my teaching. I think sharpen is pretty much that's a good verb to be using here.
And by doing so, maybe I'll speak English every day and get in touch with other people and local people and learn the real English, the daily speaking English.
Just here though, the real English. Here we don't need an article, and the daily speaking English, spoken English, or just daily English, or everyday English.
Touch with other people and local people and learn the real English, the daily speaking English, instead of what we learn in the book. It makes us easier to realize beside the background of English instead of just reading, memorizing the sentences. And I think that if after I learned English, I will come back.
Okay, let's go back here just a little bit. In the book, I don't know which specific book he's talking about, because he says the book, so we don't need the article the here. It makes us easier to realize. Okay, so this is a problem people sometimes have with easy or easier. So not it makes us easier, so it is easier for us to realize. Besides the background. Okay, I'm not sure what that means there. Memorizing sentences. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so it's not really difficult to understand what he's saying. His pronunciation is quite clear. Some words are mispronounced, but even though they're mispronounced, we can still understand what he's saying. There are some grammar errors, but the grammar errors don't get in the way of us understanding what he's saying at all.
After I learned English, I will come back and maybe I can teach English to the other kids. I will teach them how to speak English, express themselves in English, and let them have more competitive skills in the future. Because like this morning
Okay, just one thing here. You talked about the other kids. I don't know who the other kids are, because if he goes to university, there aren't going to be any kids there. And he's not a kid. So who are the other kids? Express themselves in English. Okay, so then he's going to give us an example now.
have more competitive skills in the future. Because like this morning I watched the television and it says that 63% of the parents think that English is very important, and a lot of people and parents are willing to pay more to let them children to learn English, and let the country, maybe let the people who become more competitive in the future. And then
Okay, wait, before we go on, let's just go back to what he said here. 60% of the parents. Okay, so here are the article the, but which specific group of parents is he talking about? He's just talking about parents in general in Taiwan. So there should be no article there. So just 63% of parents willing to pay more to let their children let the people who become more competitive in the future. Okay, so here we have a relative pronoun who, but it's not used properly in this sentence, because he's not talking about any specific group of people. He's just talking about people in general, and let people become more competitive. But let is also not the appropriate word here. Make people more competitive. Let their children. Okay, and here he uses let again. So if you're going to talk about how things become more competitive, the verb to be using is make, not let.
more competitive in the future, and they might find a better job here.
Okay. Okay, so here are our rounding off
Okay.
questions.
And do you think you will be good at it?
Well, I think I will after a year study in UK.
Okay, so it's a yes/no question, and you answered in one sentence. It's fine. That's all that's expected of you. All right, let's move on to part 3.
Okay, let's now move on to part 3. You've been talking about something you would like to learn, and I'd like to ask you 1 or 2 more questions related to this.
Okay.
Let's consider first of all education. How has the education system in your country changed over the past 50 years?
Okay, so
Education system.
here's a comparison question where they actually give you the specific time, so that's good.
Past 50 years.
Education system or education topic issues, I think, has played an important role in the recent years. You need to educate people to learn better or latest technologies or knowledge. Therefore, it's become a very important topic. Well, for the time being, I think education, the policy is still unstable. So therefore, I think as a teacher, we stand the frontier of the first person to face children, our students. I think it's important that we should learn more and come back and to teach them the latest information about the world and let them have the global view about what the world is going instead of just looking at what your neighbor is happening.
Okay, this is kind of interesting. He didn't answer the question at all. The question is asking him to compare 2 things or to talk about the changes between the past and now, and he didn't do that at all. He did talk about the education system, but he didn't talk about changes. He didn't make any comparison, and the examiner didn't stop him once to say, hey, that's not what the question is. I'm asking you about something else. Yeah, so this is not really going to happen in real life. Okay, so he's struggling here to think of how to express himself in the beginning because he goes from education system to education to topic issues. Okay, so it's played an important role in the recent years. Here we don't need an article. I don't know why it's only recently. Hasn't education always been an important issue? You need to educate people to learn better. Well, that doesn't mean anything really. What does that mean? It's just words. Knowledges, this doesn't take a plural. Okay, he corrected himself. It's become a very important topic. Okay, isn't that what he said before? Okay, the policy is still unstable. Unstable is not really an adjective that we would use with government policy. If we said the policy is not finalized, or the policy is changing, or the policy is in flux, that would be okay, but unstable as an adjective doesn't work here. So therefore, well, use one of these, not both. As a teacher, so it's one teacher, but it's we stand. So as teachers, we stand. But who is he talking on behalf of? Who is he representing in this? Stand at the frontier. Frontier is a good word to be using. Now he talked before how he's going to study in the UK, but then he says it's important that we should learn more and come back and teach them the latest information about the world. Well, why is he talking on behalf of other teachers? Is he saying that everybody should follow his example? But the biggest problem is that he didn't answer the question and that the examiner didn't stop him to say, hey, what's going on here? Then bring him back on track. They just went on to the next question.
And what changes do you think the education department should make to the education system?
Well, for the time being, I think we should limit it.
So here's the at the time being again.
limit the subjects to the what students need to learn, because I think there are too many subjects that are not that important, and we can focus more on the more important subjects and make them feel have more strength in the future, instead of like learning the other unimportant things. Yeah.
So, which subjects are important and which are not? And why are they important? And shouldn't students have the choice to decide?
Okay, and now let's consider schools. Do you think that co-educational schools or single-sex schools are more effective?
Well, I would not say effective in two different kind of school. I say that single-sex school has its advantages, and co-sex has also its advantages. I think it's hard to say whether which is effective and which is not. I think this is relevant.
Okay, so throughout part 1 and part 2, you didn't really lose coherence. It was pretty easy to understand what he's saying. But now in part 3, where the questions are becoming a little bit more complex, and the language that's expected of you should also be a little bit more complex, he's starting to break down a little bit and lose some coherence. It's not always that easy to understand what his point is in part 3.
And do you agree that exams are the best way to measure what a student has learnt?
Well, I say it's a important way, but I don't think it's the major way, because exam you need a criteria to level the students. Therefore,
okay, so he's talking about the merits of exams. It's not okay. So here, it's not the correct article. So it's an important way, but it's not the major way. Major is probably not the correct adjective to be using here. It's not the main way. This should be pluralized, because exams you need to something. Okay, so he's talking about criteria against which something should be measured. But instead of measure, he goes for the verb level. Level the students. Level means like to make flat. Okay. I mean, you can understand what he's saying, but he's using the wrong words here. But then we've got the characterize and the classify, which follows here.
categorize them and level them, classify them. But therefore, you need something. I think exam is a major way, and you can also use other criteria as well, like portfolios or other work they have done before.
And who do you think you learn more from, your teachers or your parents?
Well, I think I will learn more from my teachers, because teacher his main goal or his main purpose is to teach people, to let the people know how to learn or how they should get in touch with the latest knowledge. So I think I will learn more from my teacher.
Okay, now the question is, do you think you learn more? Who do you think you learn more from? But this you is not. It's not the second person you. They're not talking about you specifically. They're talking about you as in general. But he approaches this question from his own personal point of view, and he only talks about himself. So maybe the examiner could have worded the question better. Or the examiner could have asked him, well, do you think that this is also true for other people? Because he just talked about himself here. Remember, part 3 is not personal.
Teacher.
Right. And how do you think education and learning will change in the future?
Well, I think education and learning, it will change in the future, because there is not one method that will suit for the rest of life. I think it will change. It just changes. It will adapt to the. It depends on what the future will be. Education will surely change.
Well, the question was, how do you think it'll change? But he just said basically it will change. So it will change in the future because there's not just one method that suits everybody. So it will change. It'll just change. Okay. So this answer is really not very well developed. He didn't talk about what changes, what the reasons for the changes would be. Yeah. And the examiner didn't push him, maybe because they ran out of time here. But then again, the examiner didn't really push him at all. The examiner didn't really push him at all throughout the whole part 3.
Change.
Right, thank you. That is the end of the speaking test.
Okay, so let's have a look at the score. Okay, so for fluency and coherence, he misunderstood a couple of questions. Some of his answers in part 1 were quite short, as I mentioned before, and in part 3 he started to break down before using some more complex vocabulary and ideas in part 3 of the test. Some of the vocabulary he used was inappropriate. Here are some examples you can see here. And then also some word forms. Like for delicate food, maybe you should have used delicacies, although it's hard to guess what he was trying to say. The feelings, make my feelings better, makes me feel better. You confuse those two. For the grammar, I had a problem with countable and uncountable nouns, subject, verb, agreement, modals, comparatives, word order. You can see those there. And then for pronunciation, let's scroll this down. Pronunciation, well, there were some unnecessary sounds and there were some other words that he also mispronounced, but it didn't detract from you understanding what he's trying to say. So overall, this candidate got a band 6 or a possible band 6. Well, I hope you found this video helpful.